Night Comes Out presents The U-Boat. People forget just how much of a nightmare World War I was. With the evil that came with World War II, it's easy to do that. But when the First World War happened, no one had seen anything like it. The world responded by creating weapons which were new, changing the way people fought and the way they died. Now there were instruments of death that could kill thousands upon thousands. What kind of evil could that bring about? Could something be born bad? In a place where the world has gone mad, what is madness and what is horror? The men of the U-Boat find out firsthand. They discover that there are horrors beyond the man-made. And what do you do when you're trapped below the waves with the evil? It's prowling the seas, and it's hungry. To Bill Hayes at university.org, from steve.hansen at researchinst.com. Subject, U-Boat 42. Hello, Bill. So here it is. I have to tell you that this has been an amazing process. I still cannot believe that you found U-42 in the waters off of Scotland. The boat has become infamous. To find it virtually intact this many years after it sank during World War I is nothing short of amazing. I read with great interest the probes and drones you sent down there and the material you were able to gather. The metal test showing that there was very little damage is both amazing and baffling. Of course, my expertise is documents, not metallurgy, or how the ocean deteriorates things. The theories have been interesting, however. From the coldness of the water, to the lack of current, to the salination content in the place where it lays, it seems that everything has been tossed about as a possibility. I think, however, these documents may provide a very different explanation. When you announced that you had found documents from when the U-boat was built and the situations behind its building, I found that fascinating. It certainly had quite the story before it even hit the water. Then the tales of the testing. I can certainly see how U-42 got the reputation for being cursed from the start. When the drone found the sealed container that had the captain's notes and, surprise, surprise, a separate personal diary, I was thrilled. When you chose me to review, translate it, and see if I could restore it for a future museum exhibit, I figured this was the chance of a lifetime. You know what a fan I am of World War I history. Your plan to try and bring the submarine to the surface and put it on display is, to say the least, ambitious. Well, after months upon months of work, I am presenting what I have found here. Bill, the captain's diary is, well, there's no other way to put this, terrifying. I have done what I can to put the story of U-42 into some kind of narrative order here, from the first reports from the men who built it, to the diary by the captain, to the reports from the British naval ship that saw it go down. It is quite the tale. Bill, I have to tell you that I hope you read this with an open mind. I also hope you read this as a warning. I am the documents guy, but I am also a man who thinks that there may be some truth hidden in here. I think U-42 might be dangerous. I think, just maybe, it should stay where it is. I know, that sounds crazy, and unlike a man of practicality and science that I have always claimed to be. All I can say is to read on. Let me know what you think. If it haunts you the way it's haunted me since I first started reading, then I know you'll be smart enough to do what's right. Look, I don't know what happened here with this U-42. I cannot fathom why. I have checked on the location where it was built, and I see nothing in particular about the land. Perhaps it was just the fact that World War I was one of the worst conflicts in history, and the first time that the world turned warfare over almost entirely to the machines. Perhaps that energy had an effect on one of the machines. Perhaps something broke through from something nearby. I know, that sounds crazy, but it's all I can think of to justify what happened. Thank you for this opportunity. Call me with any questions. Steve Hansen, Director of Historical Documents and Restoration, Research Institute, Incorporated. Date: August 15, 1914. From Heinrich von Sturm to Christoph Volksberg. Memo: The accident on U-Boat 42. Dear Mr. Volksberg, I do apologize to you for the formality of the opening of this letter. However, I am documenting this for myself and the men here at the shipyard as much as to reach out to you for an explanation. I wanted to correspond with you personally about the accidents that happened here 2 days ago. By now, you and your office have probably read reports about what happened here, but the fact is that I was there and I saw things with my own eyes. I am a foreman in the yards. It was a great promotion and honor to be put in charge of the building of what is now known as U-Boat 42. I personally picked the entire crews that would be working on her and putting her into shape so that she can serve Germany during this conflict. It started out like any other project. The men were excited to get started. We began assembling the skeleton of the boat, and things were going well. The men were happy to be working, and the morale was good. None of the men were drunkards or lazy. I pride myself on being a good German and doing a good job. I oversaw the initial work and was pleased to report that the base metal frameworks that would form the bones of this fine ship were coming along nicely and without any major incident. That lasted for almost a week. Then came the Monday in question. All of the workers showed up on time and ready to work. No one appeared sick or drunk or unwilling to work. I must stress to you that there was no incidents that day. In fact, nothing was weird or abnormal until that afternoon, after lunch. 6 men were manning the cranes to bring the beams into the basic structure. These were heavy, sturdy beams meant to support the outer hull, and quite long, going lengthwise across U-42. We had one in place, and this was to be done before the end of the day, but there had been no delays and no one was rushing. I am unsure what happened. Herbert Raines was the crane operator, and we have questioned him. He says the crane was operating perfectly and without problems. He had been using it all day, and it had performed optimally. He himself, just after lunch, checked the chains, hooks, and ropes and found them all to be in working order. However, as the beam was hoisted and being brought into place, something happened. One moment the beam was there, moving along just like it was supposed to be moving, and then the beam was falling. The 6 men who were crushed beneath it never had a chance. They were killed instantly. I still do not know what happened. Any reasonable man would assume that the crane operator was to blame. However, we checked him, and he was not drunk and did not appear insane. Then, and here is the biggest mystery, we checked the ropes and found them to be in perfect working order. So was the crane. We have no idea how the beam fell. We also are unsure of how the beam was able to fall in such a way to kill 6 workers. Needless to say, we have been through a lot here at the yard. There has been quite a period of mourning among the workers in the town. There are already rumors that this is a haunted boat. I do not claim to be among those who believes this, and do hope that we will push forward with the construction and testing of the submarine. I think it will do well to serve Germany during this war effort. Ultimately, however, it is your decision if this boat is abandoned. I have been building ships and boats here for almost a decade, sir. I have never seen anything quite as awful as this accident, and never have there been so many fatalities as with this accident. I have a heavy heart telling you this, but the official reports, I fear, will not adequately convey what happened. The fact is, we just don't know what happened or why it happened. I look forward to your reply. Sincerely, Heinrich. Date: August 18, 1914. From Christoph Volksberg to Heinrich von Sturm. Memo: Construction of U-Boat 42. Dear Mr. von Sturm, I received and read your letter with great interest. You are correct that the report sent to me prior to your letter attempted to outline reasons for the accident, but did not go into details. That being said, the details that you furnished did little to answer any questions. Given the number of our soldiers who are currently dying on the front lines, losing even 6 more who have the skills to build ships and submarines back home is quite a loss for Germany and our war effort. You and the families of those who died have the deepest sympathies of myself and my own family. As for the rumors of hauntings and the mysterious nature of the accident, I cannot give you much insight on my part. I am considered, and consider myself, to be a practical man. I do not believe in ghosts, goblins, or other little creatures that cause accidents such as the type you witnessed. There is likely a very reasonable explanation for what happened, but we have just yet to locate the culprit. Perhaps it was a poorly tied rope or chain. The images that were sent to me of the accident were horrific. What those men must have gone through as that beam fell upon them, I cannot imagine. I understand that at least 2 of them were likely alive beneath that beam and slowly suffocated. Other than burning alive, I cannot imagine a more horrible death. As for your concerns that this contract and ship will be cancelled, do not fear. The war effort is in full swing, and every man, ship, gun, and submarine is going to be needed, even ones that has a difficult past and pains upon being birthed. I think the best way to honor those who died while building U-42 would be to make sure it is finished, and then serves its purpose to its fullest extent to end this conflict in our favor as quickly as possible. Here is to hoping no further accidents hold up building, and that this will soon be forgotten. My deepest wishes, Christoph. Government Report K764AF789 regarding testing of U-Boat 42. Subject: accident aboard the vessel after engine room built. The newly built ship, having just gotten back on schedule after an accident regarding a fallen beam, was nearing completion. The engine room had just been built. In fact, the final walls of the engine room had been put into place. Inside the boat were 3 engineers overseeing its completion of the engine room. It was 10:45 a.m. when the announcement was made that the engine room was now complete and ready for an initial test. The 3 engineers sent a celebratory note to the foreman and indicated that they wanted to stay in the chamber and make sure that workers had built the room to specifications. The 3 engineers were Theodor Kroner, Wolfram Ignatz, and Arndt Gerhard. Workers outside the submarine reported that the engine started without problem. It ran with steady communication from the engineers within for 10 minutes. About 11 o'clock a.m., workers outside the submarine realized that they had not heard from the engineers within the engine room. All attempts to reestablish communication proved ineffective. A crew was established to head into the room and see if there was a problem. They were equipped with fire suppression equipment as well as masks to deal with smoke or any fumes that might have been there. The crew opened the engine room. They reported that there was extreme resistance to the door opening for reasons that have never been established at the writing of this report. Once inside, they found the 3 engineers lying in a row just inside the door. The bodies were stiff, arms at their sides, faces toward the ceiling, side by side, their bodies sideways with head and feet towards the wall of the sub. All 3 were dead, and the entire compartment was filled with poisonous diesel fumes. They removed the bodies and opened the vents and doors to try and get the fumes out. They also shut down the engine. So far, all inspections have shown that the submarine and its engine were in proper working order. What is strange is that the bodies were arranged in a line in such a manner to suggest they had been laid down by another person. There appeared to be no scramble for the door. The bodies were not crumpled in a corner or anywhere on the floor. So far, there is no explanation for this phenomenon. Needless to say, the work crew is upset over the loss of the 3 engineers and the second disaster associated with U-42. However, it has been determined that the construction will be completed. It is of vital importance that all available resources are used and ready for the war effort. All indications of this incident should be covered up and suppressed. All steps should be taken to quiet rumors of the ship being cursed or haunted. This can include firing workers, drafting them into service, and sending them to the front lines if necessary. End. Government Report L5G7653J02 regarding U-Boat 42. Subject: accident and crew death. Just 2 days after the incident with the engineers, here I am writing you again for another accident associated with the submarine U-42. This time, it was involved in a seaworthiness test. The testing took place early in the morning near the shipyard. A testing crew was aboard. The submarine was not to go underwater, but just determine if there were leaks and to stay on the surface. The weather conditions were optimal, and the sea, upon the start of the test, was calm. The objective of the test was to use the engines on the surface of the sea to go a minimal speed up and down the channel, and, if time allowed, into the coastal waters. There was a pilot and navigator at the controls. There was also a crew in the engine room. There were 4 more inside the U-boat to determine if there were leaks, and 2 more crew on the top deck to also look for any problems or weaknesses in the welds and seams. The submarine was put into the water with great fanfare. Dozens of the workers, who had experienced so much tragedy so far, watching and celebrating. The submarine had perfect performance within the channel. The engines worked, the steering and controls worked. There were some minor leaks, but nothing of great concern. It was decided that the submarine should travel out of the channel and into open ocean for a short test before heading back. It must be stressed that this was about an hour into the test. The weather was clear with blue skies, some light white clouds, and the sea had light chop, but was not particularly violent. The submarine left the view of the workers on the dock. Another celebration was had, as this was considered a success. The reports from those on board said that things started to go wrong about 15 minutes after the submarine entered the open ocean. The crew on top of the submarine reported to the pilots that clouds had formed very suddenly on the horizon. The crew came to the conning tower and reported that dark clouds had emerged, seemingly from nowhere, and streaked across the sky. The horizon became dark, and in minutes, they were being deluged with sheets of rain. What's more, the sea suddenly became violent. The captain for the day decided that it was far too dangerous to continue the test, as the submarine was rocking violently to the left and right, and waves were now washing over the deck. The 2 crew members on deck headed for the tower and the hatch to get inside. One of them made it in, but the second was struck by a large wave that hit the submarine with such force that those inside said it rolled hard to one side, and they feared they might lose the ship. When U-42 righted itself, the crew member was gone. The crew then reported that the storm, which had come up seemingly out of nowhere, now dissipated just as quickly. The skies once again cleared, the wind died down, and the waves once again became more calm. There was no explanation for this, and all of the men are considered good in character and not the type to make up stories. I have every reason to trust that what they have told me is the truth. Since the storm had died down, and it had been mere minutes since the crewman had been swept over, they turned back around and searched for him. They threw life rings and floating debris into the water in hopes the crewman would be able to find them and cling to it. They searched a 20-mile radius, nearly using up every last bit of fuel that the diesel engines had, searching for the lost man. They could not locate the man. More searches were done by other vessels upon the submarine's return. The crewman is now considered lost and not returned. The vessel then returned home. The crew were distraught, as to be expected, and what had been a celebration earlier was much more muted upon its return. As for U-42, the vessel did perform well. Despite the storm and rough seas, there were minimal leaks and nothing serious. The engines performed well. The boat itself did not roll too much and was able to survive on the surface in rough seas. With this in mind, despite the rumors that have begun to circulate about U-42, we are still recommending that the building and push into service continue. Given the critical nature of the war and the vital purpose the fleet of U-boats will provide Germany, we cannot suggest that this boat be scrapped for any reason at this time. There are always superstitions and legends around boats and sea vessels. It is suggested that all delays cease, ceremonies held for the missing crewman, and that the submersion tests continue now, and if they go well, then a permanent crew be found, and the U-boat pressed into service for the war. End. Government Report M6H764A7890 regarding U-Boat 42. Subject: accident and crew deaths during submersion testing. At this point, the accidents surrounding this U-boat are starting to be noticed by those at the top of the chain. This report is about the latest incident, which took place during the first of the submersion tests. Overall, the U-boat performed at or above expectations, but there was once again an incident that seems to have no cause or reasoning behind it. One can only conclude that the issues this vessel has experienced since its creation is due to human error, and those same humans lying or fudging details to cover up incompetence. The boat was completed, and the test on the surface, despite the lost crewman, had been a success. Given military needs, it was decided to continue and do submersion tests. The test happened 2 days ago from the day I am writing this report to you. Much of the same crew that had manned the vessel during the surface test was back, but this time, some new crewmen had been added. The vessel set sail in the early morning. All accounts from those on the dock and in the shipyard indicate that the weather was perfect and the sea calm. The submarine headed through the channel and out into the open ocean without incident. Once they were 10 miles offshore, it was determined to test the underwater capabilities of the vessel. The pilot and captain indicated that the men were to secure their positions and prepare to dive. The following is from the captain for the day. I gave the order for the sub to dive, and the men responded fast. There was the proper and recommended crew in the pilot room, and we had another at the periscope. I had my position in the middle of the room. There were 4 men in the engine rooms, and soon the tanks were filled with water, and the submarine slipped below the surface perfectly, as it was designed to do. Information logged by others present at the test indicate that this was the case. Other crew members said that it appeared, at that point, that U-42 was going to put its shady past behind it and perform as it was designed and built to do. The submarine did sink below the waves and began running at a depth of just 20 feet below the surface. That was shortened a bit, and the periscope raised to test that as well. The captain viewed through the periscope and said it was performing perfectly. He then continued the narrative. Once I was done with the periscope test, we decided to test the planes and maneuverability of the vessel. We made a wide circle and came back to start our final run and head back into the channel and back to the dock. We had just made the final circle and then the turn when I suddenly got a frantic call from the engine room. At this point, since the captain was not near the engine room, we took the information from one of the crew that was midship. There were 4 men in the engine room as we made the turn to head back. No sooner had the boat straightened, and there was the very distinct sound of ocean water rushing through a vent and cascading down onto the metal of the floor. I ran toward the sound, looking to make sure the men back there were pulled free and that the watertight doors were closed. I soon heard the sound of men screaming. As I reached the engine room, I saw the 4 men inside, and I saw water rushing through the chamber. One of them had already reached the door, as they were all coughing and choking on the air itself. I want to stress that this happened because the air was already filling with the distinct smell of diesel fuel, as the water rushed onto the fuel cells. Of course, once the salt water was leaked into the diesel fuel cells, poisonous gas filled the engine room. Apparently, according to witnesses who were there, the engineers in the room had the presence of mind to close the door and prevent it from flooding the rest of the submarine. The submarine surfaced to try and vent the room, but it was too late. It took too long for the vessel to surface, and when the door was deemed safe to open, the men inside were dead. This has brought the death toll associated with this vessel to 11. That is by far the most of any submarine or ship being constructed for the war effort so far. It has been suggested by some that the ship be scrapped, the parts reused to build a new submarine or used in other ships. However, after discussions with top brass within the military and Navy, it has been determined that the submarine should be put into service and as quickly as possible. Other U-boats are already active and torpedoing ships bringing supplies to Great Britain and others opposing us. Already there is fear, and that is the purpose of the U-boat program. We must move forward with this to try and cripple the supply efforts of our enemies. The end result of this test is that the submarine was able to submerge and then surface, although no one has been able to explain how the vents were opened and how the salt water was able to enter the fuel compartment. If those vents are checked and confirmed closed, as is standard procedure among our Navy men, this should not be a problem. The accident that took the lives of those men is likely due to the test crew and inexperienced crew members. U-42 should go into service immediately. A search for a captain and crew is underway now. End. From the diary of Captain Eric Moritz, captain of U-42. We set out today, and I cannot believe that this is the life that God and Germany has set out for me. To be at the helm of this fantastic and amazing new technology is something to behold. The trust that the German Navy has put in me is heartening. While I do not wish for war, ever, the fact is that the world has conspired against us, and Germany must establish its might. While others wish to be helming giant dreadnought ships, and those may be the showier vessels, I am honored to venture into this world of undersea warfare. I think this may very well be the future. I foresee, far off in the distance, larger vessels with even more advanced technology prowling the seas and entire battles beneath the waves, much like I foresee battles in the air via airships. There was a celebration as we pulled away from the docks. It had been building for a while as we loaded the supplies we will need for our weeks at sea. The men were in fine form, some nervous, many as excited as me. They all did their jobs well, making sure we have everything we need to do our duty and do it well. I suppose I would be remiss if I did not mention, in my own personal diary, about the history of U-42. Yes, of course, we heard the stories about those who died and the accidents associated with the vessel. However, none of my men appeared to be superstitious. Plus, to try and allay any remnants of fear, we had a pastor bless the boat before it left, and prayers for a safe journey. God will protect us and bring us victory at sea, and perhaps help bring about a quick end to this growing war. Our mission is simple. We are to head to the coast of England and the British Isles. We are to sink as many cargo ships as we can. We are to be part of the effort to cripple the supply chain to those islands so they are unable to make war at all. That, we hope, will lead them to end this conflict, and we can all go home to our families. Yes, I do worry about the lives my mission will take, but this is a war. The people piloting those ships have been warned about U-boats and our intentions. Perhaps they do not have guns to fire, but they are as much a part of this war as any warship, and they must be removed from the battlefield to ensure German victory. So, what to make of our vessel and our living quarters? Well, there's no doubt about it, things are small. The desk upon which I am writing even now folds into the wall and is barely big enough to hold this journal and a pen. If one of the crew needs to get through here, I have to stop writing, stand, and fold the desk against the wall so they can get through. My bed is very tiny, requiring me to fold myself into a tiny basket and press against the wall, my feet touching equipment that, by the time night comes, is often quite hot, creating a situation where touching my feet to it wearing anything other than boots causes instant pain and a shriek from having been burnt. I should not complain. The men in the engine room do not have beds, they have hammocks. The other men have to share beds and work in shifts. Basically, everything is very small, and it takes a particular kind of bravery to volunteer for this mission. Tomorrow is a full day, and one filled with the work that we have set out to do. I worry about my men. I worry about making it home. I do feel a heaviness and worry about those who may be killed by what we do. I long to see my wife again and hope that I can make it through this war, and that with the U-boats and our mission, we can end this horrible conflict as quickly as possible. It is night now. The night watch is on, and the vessel is cruising along the surface at a leisurely speed. We do not expect to see much tonight or to engage the enemy. My men are anxious for some action. Perhaps tomorrow. I will close out now and hope that I can find a way to get some sleep in the cramped bed and hopefully not burn my toes off in the process. From the diary of Captain Eric Moritz, captain of U-42. From what I can decipher, this was a few days after the initial entry. Most of the dates have been worn away. We have our first kill, finally. The men were very frustrated, and even though we had only begun our mission, and I assured them that they would get the action that they desired, I could tell that they wanted to find something faster. They itched for a chance to prove themselves. Thankfully, that happened. I knew that once we entered the shipping lanes leading to England, that things would pick up. Still, the word has gotten out to the rest of the world about the U-boat operations, and ships have begun taking measures to avoid us. I knew that our charts were correct and we were in the right lanes, so it was just a matter of time. It was a lazy morning. The men had breakfast and took to their posts. I ran a few drills to make sure they stayed sharp, and they passed them all quite well. That afternoon, just after lunch, I submerged the vessel and then went to periscope depth. Soon, I saw the telltale outline of a ship in the distance. I sounded the alarm, and the men jumped into action. It was a beautiful thing to see. I wish I could have shown the world how well these men jumped into action. They were trained well, and we worked well together. They were quick to get to their posts and were the utmost professionals. I sighted the ship. I reviewed the markings to determine that it was indeed a vessel belonging to the nation of Canada. It was marked as containing supplies meant for England, and I saw that some armory had been added to the otherwise cargo-only vessel. We lined up the shot. The men got the torpedoes prepped and loaded into the launchers. We took the readings and made adjustments. We did this as silently as possible, as if afraid the men on that ship could somehow hear us. Laughable, I know. When we were within the determined range and had targeted the right portion of the ship, we fired 2 torpedoes. I was the one who watched as they exploded. The ship was damaged beyond repair and began to go down fast. Although there are some rules that the submarine should surface, according to international law, we did not. I remained, watching through the periscope as it sank. I saw the men jumping into the water, the fire as it spread, the lifeboats as they were launched. Not knowing how many were on board, I have no way of knowing how many died and how many survived. I can only say that the sailors on that vessel were well trained and managed to keep it afloat for longer than I would have given them credit, and it appeared that each lifeboat was filled. The vessel eventually broke apart and went down. We could hear its death throes from within the submarine. We held off celebrating until we slowly moved away from the scene. Once that happened, and we confirmed that we were undetected, we surfaced. I had brought along a single bottle of champagne, and we spent time on the deck drinking and celebrating. The night was clear, and the stars were bright, the ocean friendly. The men were in good spirits, and it felt good to have done something for the country and for the war effort. I celebrated, but it was muted. I knew that things would change. The other side will soon find ways to detect us and fight back. I can almost feel it. We eventually went back into the submarine, and we submerged again. We found no other targets that night. I went to bed and managed to get sleep despite the cramped quarters. A strange thing happened, however. I was awakened by a crewman sometime in the middle of the night. His eyes were wide, and he was shocked. I could see total fear in his eyes, and the moment I saw that, I shot up in bed, immediately hitting my head. Of course, seeing fear in the eyes of crewmen when you are underwater is not good, and I feared the boat was sinking. There were no alarms, however. "What is wrong?" I asked. The crewman was terrified and began to stammer. "I saw him," he told me. "Who?" "I saw the one who was on deck." It went on like that for a bit. I was unsure what he was referring to, and then realized he had heard about the crewman who had been washed over during a storm and during the testing of the vessel. He claimed that when he was on deck earlier, he had seen a ghostly image near the rear of the vessel, staring at him with dark, blank eyes. He thought he had had too much to drink and was too excited, but then he claimed, when he was on his shift that night, he heard sounds. Sounds coming from one of the vents. The sound of moaning. The sound of crying. Then finally, the sound that made him realize he was not just hearing the creaking sounds of the vessel. He heard screaming. Then there were banging sounds on the metal. He said that they were not the sounds of a vessel moving in the deep of the ocean. They seemed strange, deliberate, as if the ship itself were consuming something. The sound reminded him of chewing. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Immediately, I flashed on the training I had when I decided to volunteer for this kind of duty. No one knew for sure what would happen to men who had spent too much time underwater, away from the sun. There were some who felt they would instantly go stark raving mad. I was prepared for it, or so I thought, but I did not expect it to happen so soon. "Did anyone else hear it?" I asked. The crewman said no. "Can you take me to where you heard it?" He confirmed that he could, and moments later we were in the middle of the submarine. The thing about these newfangled submarines is that there is no way to escape the workings of the vessel. There are pipes and wires and cables exposed all along and among the ship. There are huge clusters of valves and dials and cranks along the walls, tucked away in corners and visible throughout. All of them do a separate thing, creating an amazing patchwork of devices that help the vessel rise, sink, float, move forward, move left and right, and to just function. We were surrounded by pipes overhead here. I listened. I heard nothing. I heard the steady noise of the engine. If I strained, I swore I could hear the soft sound of the ocean itself moving past the hull. I told him so. "I don't hear it now," he said. I did my best to assure him that it was just excitement and too much work, that he needed to get some sleep. I roused another crewman and asked him to take over for the distressed man. The man had wild eyes and kept telling me over and over that he had seen what he had seen. He had heard what he had heard. I did more reassuring, and his companions did the same, as having a hysterical crewman is not the ideal situation in such cramped quarters. He seemed to drift off to sleep. I spoke to the other members of the crew that were now awake and clustered around. I assured them it was nothing. I told them to either go back to their posts or to try and get some sleep, and to have some understanding that for some, life beneath the waves might be more difficult than for others. Things would look better in the morning and in the light. We would surface to get fresh air and recharge batteries, and then set about our assigned task again. Once I felt that the crew was back in some form of order and discipline, I returned to my bunk, and now here I sit, writing in my journal. Perhaps other captains would have chastised the man, enacted some form of punishment. Perhaps that is a weakness I have. I hope not. I dare not put this in an official report. Not yet. We shall see how things are in the morning. I hope I can sleep. This appears to be an entry the very next day. I cannot find any reason for this increased insanity. Things were obviously getting much worse. Well, things have gotten stranger. I am barely able to put my own thoughts in order to write this down. I am unable to reach a conclusion about the events that happened just this morning. There are a couple of possible reasons behind what happened, but both of them are profoundly disturbing. Both of them are potentially dangerous. I admit as I write this, I am afraid. Either my crew murdered a fellow crew member and are lying to me, or this vessel is indeed haunted or possessed. I cannot think of another reason for what awaited us this morning. I awoke at my usual time. The morning shift was coming on duty. I checked with the crew member who had awakened last night and taken over for the hysterical man. He was exhausted, as you might imagine, but in very good spirits. We agreed that it was strange what happened, but there had been no further incidents in the night, and we hoped that some sleep would help. I ordered the vessel to the surface, and we broke through the waves and into a glorious morning light moments later. The waves were undulating, but it was a pleasant feeling, and there were no storms. The sky above us was blue, and it was almost easy to forget that you were in a war machine in the middle of a global conflict, and that men were dying not far away on land and in other parts of the ocean. I went up onto the deck, and most of the crew followed. We had stopped the engine and were just floating, letting the ocean and tides guide us. When I did a quick check of the crew, I noticed that the man who had been so upset the night before was not there. I asked someone to check below. I was enjoying the sun and checking the horizon. The fear that ships will appear and pose a threat never fully leaves you. I was debating if we should do a drill where we fired the deck gun when the man I had sent below to seek out my fearful friend from the night before returned. He told me that the man was not below. I checked the crew on deck again. He was definitely not there. Before long, we had the entire vessel searching forward and after. We searched all of the places we felt a person could hide. The night duty did not see him. Of course, no one saw him attempt to leave. If there had been an attempt, water would have flooded the cabin, and that did not happen. The crew insists they did not surface during the night and do anything to him. Either the crew are lying to me and during the night managed to get to the surface without me knowing, then they would have dragged him off of the vessel and thrown him overboard without me hearing. I cannot fathom how that would be possible, unless something was done to drug me and keep me unconscious. And I cannot figure out how that would be done. I don't see how this is possible. So what does that leave? That leaves the unlikely and amazing possibility that he just vanished, that he was here, and then he was gone. How is that possible? I cannot imagine, but there are legends of things disappearing in the sea. There are legends of parts of this vast ocean where entire ships vanish. I am scared. I am more scared of what this might mean than the dangers of the mission that we have been tasked with. Of course, the rumors of what happened during the construction of this U-boat are on my mind. I do not want to believe in such things, but I admit that, during the darkest parts of the night, when I am in my tiny bunk, the thoughts end up in my head and I cannot push them away entirely. I am hoping that things settle down. I am unsure how to push past this other than to keep doing the mission that has been given to us. There are several days where things appear normal and day to day. Then things get weird again here. Once again, after we have successfully sunk a ship, another crewman has vanished. Once again, this happened after the same crewman said he heard sounds that were strange within the vessel. Carl was the man who came to me first. The problem is, this time several others stood behind him and said that they heard things too. Strange noises coming from the vents. Moaning and the sounds of weeping. The sounds of men weeping. One of them swears he heard the voice of the sailor who vanished after our first big victory at sea. Voices that tell them they are tired, that they should sleep, that they should let the boat do what it wants to do. They say the boat is alive. Most disturbingly, they say it's hungry, that it wants blood. I hardly knew what to say. I told them nothing of that sort could happen, that the boat was operating at peak efficiency and running fine. As you can see from my prior entries, this is the case. We have successfully now sunk 4 ships. We are planning a return to Germany within the week to get more supplies, and we plan on coming in as heroes. And yet my crew appears to be losing their minds. I did my best to reassure them, but I felt that I had lost them. I fear that their words and their own fear is spreading throughout the submarine. There was little joy among the crew as we spent time on the surface. They walked about as if they had been hypnotized. I must confess, I feel it too. I feel this tiredness, a weariness that should not be there given the victories we have had. The hunting here has been fruitful and plentiful. I want to return to port quickly. I cannot. If we abandon our mission, we could end up in trouble for desertion and other problems. My crew is afraid. This cannot end well. This appears to have been written about 2 days later. I am trapped in a tin can that has come from the bowels of hell. It has never been more evident than now. This day I should have died. The vessel should have sunk, but here it is. That is because this vessel is not normal. It is demonic. It may be evil. The crew and I have become like sleepwalkers. Something is sapping our strength, and I think it may be the vessel. 2 more crewmen vanished. We are running at barely a skeletal crew now, and still the submarine keeps on. It keeps going. It keeps seeking food. I fear it is also eating us. We do not sleep. We barely eat. I grow thinner and thinner, as do the rest of the crew. The submarine just keeps going, keeps seeking. There are noises, cries, moans, screams that awaken us now when we come across a vessel. Were there not a need for the men to load torpedoes and commit the act of firing them, I think U-42 would do so on its own. Today, however, we were allowed to surface. The submarine did so of its own accord. We gratefully accepted it and went up on deck. We were enjoying the sunlight and the air when shells began to explode in the water around us. 1 crewman was lost overboard. We never saw him come to the surface. The vessel began to descend before we were even fully ready. We barely got the hatch closed, and much water fell into the submarine. More of the shells were fired, and we eventually discovered the ship that was firing at us. It was a modified cargo vessel outfitted with guns. The submarine sustained serious damage. The crew leapt into action and did their best to contain the leaks, but the damage was indeed severe. We fired 2 torpedoes, but I did not even get to the periscope. Somehow, they hit. Our sub was hungry, evidently, perhaps angry. We descended. I do not know how far. Perhaps into hell itself. The ship began to creak and make sounds like it would collapse upon itself. I could feel the pressure. Rivets began to pop. Then it stopped. We leveled off. Suddenly, we had steering control again. The submarine began to ascend. This time, there were more sounds, but as we reached periscope depth, it was obvious that all of the leaks had stopped. The damage was gone. The engines, which had been sputtering, ran smoothly. What I am saying is that the submarine repaired itself. The submarine was struck back, and then repaired itself. I wonder if it repaired itself by eating the energy or souls of those who died on the ship that attacked us. Is this what we are doomed to be now? To somehow continue to service this machine that goes and goes and goes, to take life after life while it absorbs us, a bit at a time? Lord, if you are there, and if you have not forsaken us, help us. At this point, things seem to happen fast on the boat. The dates are even less clear. Things have gotten much worse. 2 more crew members have vanished. The rest of the crew works day and night, seemingly with no need for sleep, food, water. They stare wide-eyed at the controls. We have sunk so many more vessels, and yet we still seem to have an endless supply of torpedoes. The ship goes on and on and on. We are now headed further into sea. I walk around, and my men do not acknowledge me. They see right through me. Then, last night, I saw what has been happening to our men. I saw it with my own eyes, and it should have given me horror and terror, but I registered it and just nodded and went on with my day. I walked down the corridor and got near the rear engine room, where so much of the trouble started with this vessel. I wanted to talk to the engineers there, the 2 of them that were left, And when I walked into the room, they were there, but they were now part of the vessel. I mean, they were up against the wall, but also part of the wall. What I mean to say is that the vessel itself was absorbing them, eating them. This is what we are becoming. The vessel is growing in strength. The more it consumes, the more it needs us less and less in a physical form. Eventually, I think it will absorb all of us and be able to continue on endlessly on its own, devouring ships for all eternity, perhaps until the Earth itself is gone. I cannot let that happen. How many lives? This war, like all wars, will eventually end, but I think that U-42 will keep going and going, taking life after life even when peace reigns the land. How can I let that happen? I have to find a way. I have to stop it. Lord, give me strength. Is the war still going on now? I feel myself draining. I feel myself barely hanging on. From later that day, it seems. This evening, I was walking the corridors of the vessel. We have not surfaced in a while, and we will need to do so. It appears that the batteries do not heal themselves and still need to be recharged, and the charge there is getting low. We will have to surface. Anyway, I was walking, unable to sleep, my eyes hollow and dark. The remaining crew were there at their post. I noticed several of them appeared to have become part of the vessel. Just like the men in the engine room, they still moved, still tried to function, seemingly unaware that they were being devoured. While walking, I became aware that there were others in the corridor with me. I turned slowly. I felt a brief hint of fear, but that soon vanished. I could see the shape of the man who had been washed over. His own face with dark voids where the eyes should have been, his mouth open, as if forever screaming and drowning. Behind him were the men who had died when the beam fell upon them as U-42 was being constructed. Even in death, as they stood there glowing and shimmering, barely there, their heads were crushed, their bodies deformed. On and on the bodies went. I could see through them. All of them had blackness where their eyes should be, and all looked like they were screaming in agony. The men that had already been absorbed. The man who first came to me that first night. Then countless faces I did not recognize. They must have been those who died when we torpedoed their ships. Men, women, even children. My Lord. They looked at me, and their screaming faces and eyes accused me. Somehow it was my fault, as if the vessel were telling me it knew I was not entirely over to its side. Somehow I am resisting, while the others have given in to the call of the submarine. I could hear their voices in my head, telling me to give in, that things would be better if I gave in and let the submarine take me, that all of the oceans around the world would be ours. This made no sense when the faces etched with agony reflected back at me. I could not bear it and eventually collapsed. When I awoke, the images were gone, and it took great effort on my part to remove myself from the floor, as if the vessel were already trying to absorb me. I do not know how to stop this. How do I stop it? This appears to be from about 2 days later. I think I have found a way to stop U-42. I discovered it when we surfaced yesterday. The remaining crew came up, and I could see that they were not as enthralled as they had been when below. Even I could feel a lessening of the ship's call in my own mind. It appears that U-42 must rest. It is as if the submarine has come to life, and when it comes to the surface, we feel less control over our minds, as if the vessel itself must rest, perhaps drinking the sunlight. I am writing at the moment on the surface, and this gives me an idea. I think there may be a way to try and destroy this submarine. I think it can be done, but it will take cunning, and the number of people that I have to work with grows smaller all the time. Perhaps we can sink the vessel if it is at the surface, and perhaps when it is resting, it is less likely to repair itself. Perhaps. I must stop now and talk to the men. I hope I'm right. It has been many days before there is another entry. The general captain's log shows that the vessel continued to travel beneath the waves and sunk many more vessels. The body count for U-42 must have been staggering. How it never ran out of ammunition is beyond me. This entry appears to be about a week later. My theories, I believe, are correct. Time is running out, so the plan was enacted yesterday. We surfaced again and recharged, and once again, the U-boat seemed to sleep. At that time, we set about hiding explosives around the vessel, focusing on key areas so that the submarine will flood and the explosions will cause maximum damage. Even the torpedoes, the ones that never end, are now wired and ready to blow. We realize that we are sacrificing ourselves, and that the vessel itself will likely still absorb us into itself, but we hope to do enough damage to send U-42 to the bottom of the sea, where the pressure will keep it from healing and coming back. Perhaps we can keep it beneath the waves long enough that it will essentially starve itself to death. So many more dead. Yesterday we sank an obvious passenger liner. There was nothing about it that resembled a military vessel. The men did their thing. I stood there and let them. Why has the boat not taken me? I don't even operate the controls. Perhaps that's part of it. I'm not in physical contact with it all the time. My mind is wandering. I'm so exhausted. I did peer through the periscope and watch the vessel sink. I saw the flames. I saw it break up. I can see the faces of men, women, and children as they flailed in the water, unable to get to lifeboats due to how rapidly it was sinking. I saw them drown. Then I saw them within the walls of the submarine itself during the night. Their faces frozen in terror, their eyes black and endless. If the submarine will let me, I hope to head toward deeper waters. I hope I can find a very deep place, and then to surface and trigger the explosives. There are only 4 of us left now. I think we will lose more tonight. Lord, please help us. Please help us do this. I do not expect to write any more in this journal. I will seal it away in a watertight box and secure it. Perhaps one day someone will read it. I don't know. I hope not. Then again, perhaps it will be long dead. I hope so. For the sake of all on the sea. For the sake of the rest of the world. The next data we have on U-42 is the log of a British battleship. This is from that captain's letter back home not long after the last diary entry from above. This is the one witness we have to what happened to the U-boat. Dear Delia, I'm writing to you to tell you that I have had, without a doubt, one of the strangest experiences yet being the captain of this vessel. The men are eager, and we are doing well. But we were very ready for action the other day when we seemed to just stumble upon a vile and vicious German submarine just miles off the coast of Scotland. As you know, these horrific devices, certainly conceived within the bowels of hell itself, have sown terror across the globe and started to stifle the supplies to our great nation to battle the terrible Huns. We have been tasked with finding ways to sink them, although finding them beneath the ocean is difficult. The thing about submarines, they do have to surface. It is our understanding they must surface to clean out the air within and to recharge batteries that are used to keep them underwater. Normally, when submarines are on the surface, most of the crew comes up for air as well, as it must be cramped and smelly in the bowels of these things. They are always looking out for ships like ours, and they are outfitted with deck guns that the crews are trained to use with great precision. Many ships have been sunk by those instead of the much more terrifying torpedoes. We had been hoping for a great match against another battleship like ours, but we do keep our eyes and ears open for these submarines. So it was a great surprise to come across one that was on the surface, seemingly totally oblivious to our large vessel as it approached. It shone in the sunlight against a mostly calm sea, and it appeared abandoned. It floated there as if waiting for us. Hoping for us. I looked through my binoculars and saw that there were crew, however, only 3 men. One of them wore the insignia we have come to know as that of a captain of one of these vessels. They stood in the conning tower, staring straight ahead. They looked, quite frankly, like living ghosts. Their skin was pale, their eyes were sunken and nearly black. It was like staring into death itself, and at one point, I swear the captain looked directly at me, right into my eyes through the binoculars, although that would have been impossible. I swear to you, my dear, he looked right at me, as if he knew I was there, knew I was looking, and a pair of darker, more haunted eyes have never existed. He wanted us to fire. I told the crew to ready the guns. We were going to blast this thing out of the water. If they were going to make ready targets of themselves, then that was fine by me. The crew hopped into action while I kept the submarine in my sights. At some point, the crew went down below. The captain, however, remained on the conning tower, still staring at me and at us. There was even the faintest hint of a smile on his face. The crew readied the weapons. I gave out orders. It was to be an easy shot, although we were prepared for them to sink below the surface at any time, perhaps hoping to toy with us before sending torpedoes into our vessel. That did not happen. Just as I was about to give the order to fire, I peered through my binoculars again and saw the captain of the submarine, still staring, still with that half-smile. Then the submarine exploded. The explosion was from below the waterline, and it was massive. I looked through the binoculars as it happened, and the bright flash of it burned my own eyes, but I held fast and continued my vigil. It was a terrific explosion. I cannot fathom what happened. Did their entire torpedo room explode? I cannot say, but it was tremendous, and the flames shot to the surface, and the conning tower was soon engulfed. I saw one last glimpse of the captain, and then the flames took him, and he vanished from sight. The entire submarine blew apart, and even from where we were, we heard something unlike anything we had heard from any vessel that had sunk before. A roar. A horrific, almost deafening roar. Sometimes ships, when they sink, make noises that sound almost human, but they are often sad, as if the ship is weeping in its final moments. This was something akin to anger. Only I was still looking through my binoculars, and only I saw the flames erupt from where the submarine exploded, and I swear I saw a face in it, an angry, demonic face like that of Satan himself. Angry. The flames leapt higher than I had seen any leap before, and the scream and roar went on and on. I could see my men on deck, and they heard it too, and they were terrified. None of them had fired. Whatever happened was on the submarine. It sank fast, and the flames died out quickly. The roar seemed to linger for a long time, but eventually faded as well. I do not know, my dear, what I saw or heard that day. I believe that this global conflict is not something favored by gods or men, and only by demons. Perhaps one had grasped that vessel. I do not know, but it was an experience that shall haunt my dreams for years to come. I pray for the souls of the men on that vessel. This war is terrible enough with what man has done. I cannot imagine what it would be like to also battle the supernatural. There are more things on heaven and earth than we can fully comprehend. I stared into it the other day. I fear for my own soul now. Be well, my dear. Pray for us all. I hope to be home soon. Lovingly, Captain Darren Wiltshire. To bill.hayes@university.org. From Steve Hansen at researchins.com. Subject: U-Boat 42. Bill, that is all I have. I hope you read it with as open a mind as possible. As you can see, something very strange happened on U-42, something I cannot explain. You may want to dismiss it all as coincidence and chance mixed with superstition. I know I did. But since I've taken possession of the papers from that vessel, strange things have been happening here. The other night, as I walked from my office to my car, I swear I heard footsteps behind me, and when I turned around, I could swear I saw a man with black pits for eyes vanish behind a corner. A man that appeared dressed in World War I submarine captain's clothing. A mind affected by what I've read? Perhaps, but I swear the diary and other papers have been moved around when I'm not looking, or overnight. Others in the office swear they hear laughter in the vents, or coming from the sink or drains. There have been sightings of other pale figures with dark eyes. I understand that when your drone found the U-boat, it was in near pristine condition, which should be impossible. In such great condition, in fact, that you have been tempted to try raising it, with the hope of making it a museum piece, like they did with that World War II submarine in Chicago. I beg of you not to do this. In fact, send explosives down there and destroy U-42 again. Blow it to pieces and bury it if you can. I'm going to get rid of these documents. I am sending them back to you, but I urge you to burn them and then scatter the ashes. Perhaps call in a priest. Perhaps I'm paranoid, but I beg of you not to go further. I fear that this machine somehow was born with something wrong with it, something evil. It has lain dormant for a long time, but now you have discovered it, and it's awake, and it's going to be hungry. I hope you don't think me utterly mad. Be well, Steve. To David Higgins, 321 at researchins.com. From Bill Hayes at university.org. Subject, U-Boat 42 Recovery. David, I am at a loss to explain what happened with Steve. He has always seemed such a steady and reliable scientist. The things in the diaries I am also at a loss to explain. I can only think some kind of fumes must have been leaking into the submarine long before it sank. As to the diary of the British ship, I am at a loss there too. Given the historic value of finding that U-boat in such condition, I am recommending that we move forward with raising it. We must have it at a museum. There is much we can learn. I am also curious about the damage done to that drone. It seemed to go crazy the other day while exploring the vessel and nearly ripped out part of our vessel, taking crewmen with it. We had to cut that line. That is costly. I hope the rest of the mission goes well. Let me know if you have questions. We need to meet soon to discuss how this can be done. The world will be amazed, and I can't wait to show the world what we found. Bill.